December 24, 1999, Tribhuvan International Airport, Kathmandu. The airport buzzed like a crowded subway at rush hour. Travelers hustled with backpacks, kids clung to candy wrappers, and a smell of cheap coffee drifted through the terminal. Nobody knew hell was about to board Indian Airlines Flight IC-814. Rajesh Sharma tightened his grip on his boarding pass. His wife, Kavita, adjusted her shawl, smiling nervously. "Relax," Rajesh whispered. "We'll be in Delhi before dinner. Easy ride." But across the terminal, 5 men stood apart, quiet, still, watching. Each carried minimal luggage, no chatter, no laughter, just cold eyes scanning faces like predators waiting to pounce. One of them, tall and sharp-jawed, adjusted his jacket. Hidden beneath it, steel, grenades, and rage. His name would later shake governments, but right now, he was just another passenger, or so everyone thought. Boarding begins. Flight IC-814 was scheduled to fly from Kathmandu to New Delhi, a routine flight. 178 passengers, 11 crew members, families, honeymooners, students, businessmen. Nobody expected it to turn into a floating prison in the sky. Inside the cockpit sat Captain Davy Sharan, calm and experienced. He had flown this route dozens of times. Just another day, or so he believed. The doors closed, engines roared, and at 4:30 p.m. the aircraft lifted into the fading golden sky. Christmas Eve, the worst Christmas many would ever live through. 30 minutes later, the mask drops. The plane cruised smoothly at 30,000 feet. Passengers unwrapped snacks. Kids fought over window seats. A flight attendant smiled politely. "Would you like tea or coffee, sir?" That's when it happened. Suddenly, a man jumped from his seat, then another, and another. 5 men, all at once. One of them pulled out a knife, long, shining, deadly. Another held what looked like a grenade, a real one. Passengers froze. A woman screamed. "Sit down," one hijacker shouted. His voice cut through the cabin like broken glass. "Everybody sit the hell down. Nobody moves." American slang mixed with heavy accents. Fear spread faster than wildfire. One hijacker grabbed a young man, Rupin Katyal, newly married, still glowing from his honeymoon. Wrong place, wrong time. The hijacker pressed a knife against Rupin's throat. "Listen up," he yelled. "This plane is ours now." Gasps echoed. People prayed. Kids cried. Chaos had officially taken over Flight IC-814. Cockpit breach. One hijacker stormed toward the cockpit. He slammed on the door. "Open it, now." Inside, Captain Davy Sharan felt sweat form on his neck. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a warning. This was real. He opened the cockpit door. The hijacker shoved a grenade forward. "You fly where we tell you, or this bird goes boom." Captain Sharan swallowed hard. "Where do you want to go?" The hijacker smirked. "To Lahore." Silence. Heavy silence. Because everyone knew that meant international trouble. Big trouble. Government-level trouble. Fuel panic. There was just one problem. Fuel. Not enough to reach Lahore. Captain Sharan spoke carefully. "Negative. We don't have enough fuel." The hijacker's eyes narrowed. "Don't play games with me, man." "I'm not," the captain replied calmly. "We crash if we try." The hijackers argued among themselves, voices rising, tension snapping like tight wire. Finally, they gave a new order. Land at Amritsar. That was still India, still hope, still hope. Landing at Amritsar, a missed opportunity. As the aircraft descended towards Sri Guru Ram Das Ji International Airport, passengers silently prayed. Indian authorities rushed into crisis mode. Police vehicles surrounded the runway. Fuel trucks moved slowly, very slowly, too slowly. Inside the plane, tension exploded. Hijackers shouted, "Why is this taking so long?" Captain Sharon tried to stall, hoping commandos would storm the plane, but time slipped away. Seconds turned into minutes, minutes turned into disaster. One hijacker dragged Rupin Katyal forward. Without warning, slash! The knife tore into Rupin's body. Blood spilled across the aisle. Passengers screamed. Women fainted. Kids cried hysterically. "Move this damn plane now!" the hijacker roared. Ground forces hesitated. One delay, one fatal delay, and then the hijackers forced the plane to take off again. India had missed its first chance. Night falls, terror deepens. The plane climbed into darkness. Blood soaked the floor. Rupin Katyal lay dying. His wife sobbed uncontrollably. Passengers shook in silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody dared. Meanwhile, government scrambled. Phones rang non-stop in New Delhi. Crisis teams formed. Military units prepared. Because this wasn't just a hijacking anymore. This was international terrorism, and it was only day one. Destination, Lahore. The hijackers demanded landing permission in Lahore, but Pakistani authorities refused at first. Lights on the runway were turned off, no landing allowed. Fuel levels dropped dangerously. Inside the cockpit, warning alarms beeped. Fuel nearly gone. Passengers whispered prayers. This could be the end, right there in the dark sky. Finally, runway lights flickered on. Barely in time, the aircraft descended fast, hard, and touched down in Lahore. But the nightmare was just getting started.
December 24th, 1999. Nightfall over Pakistan. The wheels of Indian Airlines Flight IC-814 slammed against the runway in Lahore like a desperate man kicking down a locked door. The landing wasn't smooth. It was rough, angry, urgent. Inside the cabin, passengers clutched their seats like their lives depended on it, because they did. Outside, the runway lights flickered weakly, barely enough to guide the aircraft. Pakistani authorities had turned the lights on at the last second. Fuel was nearly gone. One more minute in the air, and that plane could have dropped like a rock. Inside the cockpit, Captain Devi Sharan wiped sweat from his forehead. "Man, that was too damn close," he muttered under his breath. Behind him, the hijacker holding the grenade smirked. "Don't relax yet, Captain. This party ain't over." Not even close. Inside the cabin, blood and fear. Back in the passenger area, the atmosphere was pure nightmare fuel. Rupin Katyal, the young newlywed stabbed during the chaos in Amritsar, lay motionless. Blood had soaked through his clothes, pooling beneath the seat. His wife, Rachna, clung to him. "Wake up! Please, wake up! Don't do this!" Her voice cracked into sobs, but deep down, everyone knew. The guy was fading fast. A flight attendant whispered urgently to a hijacker. "He needs medical help. He's dying." The hijacker stared coldly. "No funny business, no hero stuff. You hear me?" Still, the crew tried to stop the bleeding using whatever they had. Napkins, scarves, even torn fabric from clothing. Passengers helped quietly. Nobody wanted to be the next victim. Pakistan's cold shoulder. Outside, things weren't exactly friendly. Authorities in Pakistan were nervous, real nervous. They didn't want this hijacked aircraft sitting on their runway like a ticking bomb. Fuel trucks approached, slowly but cautiously. Negotiations crackled over radio frequencies. Inside the cockpit, one hijacker barked into the radio. "We want full fuel, now, no delays." Pakistani officials stalled. Minutes stretched like rubber bands ready to snap. Inside the cabin, passengers whispered, "Are they going to storm the plane? Will they shoot us? Are we going to die here?" Fear had become the only language everyone understood. Finally, fuel was provided, but with one clear message: leave, immediately. Pakistan wanted the aircraft gone. No drama, no bloodshed on their soil. Just get out. Rupin Katyal's final moments. The engines roared back to life. The aircraft lifted off again into the black night sky. Inside, things turned heartbreakingly quiet. Rupin Katyal's breathing slowed, then stopped.
A flight attendant checked his pulse. Nothing. She looked at another crew member, shook her head. Gone. Dead. Murdered in cold blood. The first victim of the hijacking. Rachna screamed, a sound so raw, so broken, it echoed through the cabin like shattered glass. "No! No! He can't be gone!" Passengers cried silently. Some prayed. Some stared blankly, their minds refusing to process reality. One hijacker shouted, "Shut it down! No noise!" But grief doesn't follow orders. Not ever. Destination shift. Dubai. Inside the cockpit, tension kept rising. Fuel levels were stable now, but uncertainty ruled the skies. Hijackers huddled together, whispering in harsh tones. Then came the next command. Set course to Dubai. Captain Sharan nodded slowly. Copy that. Outside the aircraft windows, darkness stretched endlessly. Inside the aircraft, hope was hanging by a thread. Meanwhile, in New Delhi, crisis rooms were packed wall to wall. Government officials paced like caged animals. Phones rang non-stop. Maps were spread across tables. India's leadership knew something ugly was unfolding, and the clock was ticking. Dubai, a glimmer of relief. Hours later, the aircraft approached Dubai International Airport. This time, authorities were ready. Runway lights blazed brightly. Emergency vehicles lined the tarmac. The aircraft touched down smoothly. Inside the cabin, passengers barely breathed. Would this be the end? Would commandos rush in? Would bullets start flying? Nobody knew. Then something unexpected happened. Negotiations began. Real negotiations. Hijackers made their first official demands. They wanted the release of terrorists imprisoned in India. Dangerous men. Men the Indian government had locked away for years. The kind of guys governments don't like letting go. Not ever. Partial freedom. Some walk free. After intense negotiations, something shocking happened. The hijackers agreed to release 27 passengers, mostly women, children, elderly passengers. Also, they allowed the body of Rupan Katyal to be removed. As his body was carried out, silence filled the aircraft. Passengers bowed their heads. Some whispered prayers. Others stared blankly, their minds refusing to process reality. One hijacker shouted, "Shut it down! No noise!" But grief doesn't follow orders. Not ever. The real destination, Kandahar. Late that night, after refueling again, the hijackers gave their next order. Fly to Kandahar. The cockpit went silent. Captain Sharan exchanged glances with his co-pilot. They both understood what that meant. Big trouble. Because Afghanistan at that time was controlled by the Taliban, a place where law worked differently, where negotiations could get messy, real messy, and dangerous. Passengers overheard whispers. Kandahar? Isn't that Taliban territory? Oh God, we're doomed. Fear returned, stronger than ever, like a storm rolling back after a brief calm. Landing in Kandahar, enter the Taliban. Hours later, as dawn approached, the aircraft descended towards Kandahar International Airport. Dust swirled across the runway. Armed fighters surrounded the landing zone. Not police, not army. Taliban fighters. Bearded, silent, watching, weapons ready. The aircraft touched down, and just like that, Flight IC-814 became a hostage fortress sitting in hostile territory. Passengers stared through windows. Outside stood men with rifles and cold eyes. Inside sat hijackers with grenades and knives. Between them, 178 terrified human beings. Trapped, waiting, praying, hoping someone, somewhere, had a plan.
December 25th, 1999. Day 2. Morning broke over Kandahar, but there was nothing peaceful about it. Dust swirled across the runway of Kandahar International Airport like smoke from a battlefield. And sitting right there in the middle of it, Indian Airlines Flight IC-814, a flying prison, a ticking bomb, a nightmare parked in the heart of territory controlled by the Taliban. Surrounded, but not saved. Passengers pressed their faces to the windows. Outside, armed Taliban fighters stood in a loose circle around the aircraft. Long beards, loose robes, rifles slung across shoulders. They weren't smiling. They weren't helping. They were watching, like wolves circling wounded prey. Inside the cabin, whispers spread fast. Are they here to rescue us? Or to help the hijackers? Man, this is messed up. One hijacker laughed softly. Nobody's coming to save you, buddy, he said, leaning back casually. You're stuck here till we get what we want. American slang rolled off his tongue like mockery. Passengers felt their hope shrink like ice in the desert sun. Back in India, panic explodes. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away in New Delhi, the situation was spiraling out of control. Families gathered outside government buildings, crying, shouting, begging. News channels ran non-stop coverage. Every face on television looked tense. One official stood before reporters, his voice stiff. We are doing everything possible to ensure the safety of passengers aboard Flight IC-814. But behind closed doors, it was chaos. Maps, files, intelligence reports, phones ringing non-stop. India had sent a negotiation team to Kandahar. Leading them was Ajit Doval, a man known for calm nerves and sharp thinking. He knew this wasn't just negotiation. This was psychological warfare, and every word mattered. Inside the aircraft, slow torture. Back on the plane, conditions were getting ugly, real ugly. Food supplies were running low, water was rationed, bathrooms were filthy, air felt thick, stale, suffocating. Passengers hadn't slept properly in nearly 24 hours. Kids cried non-stop. Adults sat frozen like statues carved from fear. One hijacker paced up and down the aisle, knife in hand. Tap, tap, tap. Each step echoed like a countdown clock. Anybody tries to act smart, he warned, pointing the blade around, and this ride turns into a bloodbath. Nobody dared breathe loudly. The first official demands. Later that day, negotiations finally began. Hijackers sent their message through intermediaries, and when Indian negotiators heard it, their blood ran cold. The hijackers demanded the release of 36 imprisoned terrorists from Indian jails. Not small-time criminals, dangerous militants, men accused of bombings, kidnappings, murders, the kind of people governments lock away forever. Inside negotiation tents outside the aircraft, tension skyrocketed. Ajit Doval leaned forward, expression tight. 36? He repeated quietly. That's insane. Officials exchanged worried glances. Releasing even one terrorist could shake national security, but refusing could mean dead hostages. A brutal choice. Either way, someone pays.
Taliban, friend or foe? The role of the Taliban remained unclear. They surrounded the aircraft, but didn't storm it. They talked to the hijackers, but didn't openly support them. It was like watching a referee who might secretly be rooting for one team. Passengers watched nervously as Taliban fighters moved around outside. One man whispered, "Man, we ain't in Kansas anymore." Another passenger muttered prayers under his breath. Nobody trusted anyone. Not the hijackers, not the Taliban, not even the future. Psychological warfare begins. The hijackers knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't just controlling the aircraft, they were controlling fear. Every few hours they would shout suddenly, bang on seats, wave grenades, fake countdowns. One hijacker grabbed a random passenger, dragged him into the aisle, pressed a knife to his neck. Passengers gasped. "Tell your government," he shouted loudly. "We're serious, no games." The passenger trembled like a leaf in a storm. Then, the hijacker shoved him back into his seat. Alive, but broken. It was mind games, pure terror tactics, and it worked. Families protest. India boils. Outside government offices in New Delhi, families of hostages gathered in huge crowds. Mothers cried, fathers shouted, children clung to photographs of missing loved ones. One man yelled into television cameras, "Bring them back, do whatever it takes." The pressure on the government exploded. Public anger rose like steam from boiling water. Media coverage intensified. Every hour without resolution felt like another stab to the nation's heart. Night falls, hunger sets in. Back inside the aircraft, darkness returned. Another sleepless night. Food supplies were now dangerously low. Passengers shared crumbs, sips of water. Some went hours without drinking anything. Children cried from hunger. An elderly passenger fainted. Crew members begged hijackers for food. After heated arguments, minimal supplies were allowed. Barely enough to survive. Not enough to live comfortably. Not even close. Hijackers revealed their core demand. Late that night, hijackers sent another message. This one was shorter, sharper, more dangerous. They reduced their demand from 36 terrorists to 3 key prisoners. But these weren't ordinary prisoners. They wanted Maulana Masood Azhar, Ahmed Omar Sheikh, and Mustaq Ahmed Zargar. Inside negotiation tents, silence followed. Heavy silence. Those names carried weight. Dangerous weight. Releasing them could change history, but refusing could kill innocent civilians. Ajit Doval leaned back slowly. "This just got real ugly," he muttered, and he wasn't wrong. Passengers break down. Inside the aircraft, emotional collapse spread like wildfire. One woman cried non-stop for hours. Another passenger whispered prayers without pause. Some people stared blankly like their souls had checked out. A young boy tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mom, are we gonna die?" She forced a smile. "No, sweetheart, we're gonna be okay." But her shaking hands told a different story. End of day 2. Hope fading. As night swallowed the desert sky over Kandahar, the aircraft remained trapped, engines silent, cabin tense, passengers exhausted, negotiators stressed, hijackers restless. Everyone waited for orders, for decisions, for miracles, because the next move would decide life or death for everyone.
December 27th through 30th, 1999. Days 4 to 6. By now, time inside Indian Airlines Flight 814 had lost meaning. Day blended into night, night blurred into panic, and panic turned into exhaustion. The aircraft still sat motionless at Kandahar International Airport, surrounded by fighters from the Taliban. Inside, the hostages were breaking. Mentally, physically, emotionally. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was endurance. Inside the plane, people start cracking. Passengers hadn't slept properly in days. Clothes were dirty, faces pale, eyes hollow. Food was barely enough to keep people alive. Water was rationed like gold. One middle-aged man leaned against the seat, whispering, "Man, this is hell, straight up hell." Nearby, a child cried weakly, not loudly anymore, just soft, tired sobs, the kind that made your chest hurt to hear. Flight attendants did their best, moving carefully, speaking gently, calming passengers, but even they were losing strength. One steward whispered to another, "I don't know how much longer we can keep this together." The other nodded silently. Nobody had answers. Hijackers grow more aggressive. The hijackers were getting impatient, real impatient. They walked the aisles constantly, knives visible, grenades always in hand. One of them slammed his fist against a seat. "Tell your government to stop playing games!" he shouted. His voice echoed through the cabin like thunder. Passengers froze instantly. Another hijacker shouted from the front, "If we don't get what we want, people start dying, one by one." No bluff in his tone, no hesitation, just raw threat. Psychological pressure had reached maximum level. Outside, the Taliban step in.
Outside the aircraft, the Taliban began playing a bigger role. They weren't rescuers, but they weren't completely ignoring the situation either. They surrounded the plane with armed guards. Officially, they claimed to be maintaining security. Unofficially, they were acting like referees in a deadly game. Taliban officials moved between negotiators and hijackers, carrying messages back and forth. Inside negotiation tents, tensions were rising. India's negotiation team, including Ajit Doval, sat across Taliban intermediaries. Maps lay on tables, files scattered everywhere, coffee cups stacked like battlefield debris. No one had slept properly. No one trusted anyone.
Back home, public pressure exploded. Meanwhile, in New Delhi, emotions were boiling over. Families of hostages staged protests outside government buildings, holding photos, shouting slogans, begging authorities to act. One elderly father shouted into microphones, "My son is on that plane! Bring him back, no matter what it takes!" Television screens showed non-stop footage. News anchors spoke urgently. Experts debated. Politicians argued. The pressure on the government had reached breaking point. The entire country was watching, waiting, judging. The names that changed everything. The hijackers stuck to their final demand: release 3 prisoners, 3 dangerous men, 3 names that would echo through history: Maulana Masood Azhar, Ahmed Omar Sheikh, and Mushtaq Ahmed Zargar. Inside government war rooms in New Delhi, officials stared at the list. Heavy silence filled the room. One senior officer whispered, "If we release them, the consequences could be massive." Another replied quietly, "If we don't, people on that plane die." It was a lose-lose situation. No clean endings, no easy choices, just damage control. Inside the aircraft, breaking point. Passengers were deteriorating fast. An elderly woman collapsed from dehydration. Children developed fevers. Adults whispered prayers non-stop. One man muttered repeatedly, "God, just get us out of here." Crew members tried to keep morale alive, but fear was spreading faster than hope. A hijacker suddenly grabbed a passenger again, pulling him into the aisle, knife pressed against his neck. "Maybe we send one body back," he sneered. Gasps erupted. Passengers covered their mouths, waiting, watching. Seconds passed. Then, the hijacker shoved the passenger back into his seat, alive but trembling uncontrollably. It was another mind game, another reminder of power, another psychological punch. Government makes the hardest decision. By December 30th, 1999, India faced its darkest moment in the crisis. Negotiators reported worsening conditions inside the aircraft. Passengers were physically and mentally collapsing. Public pressure had become unbearable. Finally, the decision came. India agreed to release the 3 prisoners. It wasn't victory, it wasn't defeat, it was survival. And survival sometimes comes with a price, a heavy one. The transfer begins. Preparations moved fast. Inside New Delhi, the 3 prisoners were taken from their high-security cells, escorted under heavy guard. Vehicles moved in tight convoys. Security was maximum. No risks, no mistakes. Those prisoners were then flown toward Kandahar. Inside the hijacked aircraft, whispers spread. "They're bringing the prisoners. Maybe this is the end. Maybe we're going home." Hope flickered again, weak, fragile, but alive. Arrival of the prisoners. At Kandahar International Airport, tension reached explosive levels. The aircraft carrying the 3 prisoners touched down. Taliban fighters moved quickly around the runway. Negotiators stood ready. Hijackers inside Flight 814 watched through windows, eyes burning with anticipation. This was the moment they had waited for. Days of terror, days of pressure, days of fear, all leading to this single exchange. One wrong move, and everything could explode, literally. Passengers prepare for anything. Inside the cabin, silence ruled. Nobody spoke, nobody moved. Passengers clutched hands, whispered prayers, closed eyes. Some believed freedom was coming, others feared betrayal. One passenger muttered softly, "Man, if this goes sideways, we're done." Nobody argued, because deep down, everyone knew he was right. Seconds before freedom or death. As evening approached, final negotiations began. Taliban intermediaries moved between between aircraft. Hijackers whispered urgently among themselves. Indian negotiators waited, tense and silent. Everything balanced on a knife's edge. Every second felt like an hour. Every breath felt heavy. One mistake, one panic move, one misunderstanding could trigger disaster and end 178 lives in seconds.
December 31st, 1999, Day 7. The desert air over Kandahar felt heavy that evening, like the world itself was holding its breath. 7 days. 7 days of fear, hunger, sleepless nights, and raw terror inside Indian Airlines Flight IC-814. 7 days that changed history forever. And now, everything was about to reach its final moment. The exchange begins. Outside at Kandahar International Airport, the runway turned into a stage for one of the most tense hostage exchanges the world had ever seen. Taliban fighters stood guard, weapons ready, eyes cold. Indian negotiators, including Ajit Doval, stood nearby, watching every movement carefully, not blinking, not relaxing, because one wrong move and the entire aircraft could turn into a fireball. The prisoners arrived. A separate aircraft rolled slowly onto the runway. Inside it were the 3 prisoners whose names had haunted every conversation during the crisis: Maulana Masood Azhar, Ahmed Omar Shaikh Sheikh, and Mushtaq Ahmed Zargar. Men considered extremely dangerous, men whose freedom would later echo across global terrorism cases. But at that moment, they were bargaining chips, nothing more, nothing less. Inside Flight IC-814, passengers sensed movement outside. Some leaned toward windows, others stayed frozen, too scared to look. One passenger whispered, "Is this it? Are we finally getting out?" Nobody answered, because nobody knew. Hijackers get what they wanted. The 3 prisoners stepped onto the runway. Taliban fighters supervised the exchange. Indian negotiators, including Ajit Doval, stood nearby, watching every movement carefully, not blinking, not relaxing, because one wrong move and the entire aircraft could turn into a fireball. The moment of release. Then, finally, the command came. Passengers were ordered to prepare to leave. No shouting, no sudden moves, just line up, slowly, carefully, one by one. Inside the aircraft, disbelief spread. Was this real, or another cruel trick? Flight attendants moved down the aisle, guiding people gently. Stay calm, don't rush. Passengers gathered their weak strength, legs shaking, hearts pounding. Then, the aircraft doors opened. For the first time in 7 days, fresh air rushed inside, like freedom itself. Passengers stepped onto the runway at Kandahar International Airport. Some collapsed to their knees, some kissed the ground, some cried uncontrollably, not silent tears, loud, broken sobs, the kind that comes after surviving pure horror. Hijackers disappeared into darkness. As passengers moved away, the hijackers made their final escape, protected by Taliban forces, vanishing into the shadows of Kandahar. No arrests, no shootouts that day, just disappearance, like ghosts fading into desert dust, and with them, the scars of 7 days of terror. Soon after release, survivors were flown back to New Delhi. When the aircraft landed there, chaos erupted. But this time, it was emotional chaos. Families rushed forward, crying, screaming names, hugging loved ones so tight it looked like they would never let go. One mother collapsed into her daughter's arms. "I thought you lost you. I thought you were gone." Another father hugged his son silently. No words, just tears. Even rescue personnel wiped their eyes, because after 7 days of terror, these people had survived hell, remembering the victim. But not everyone came back alive. The body of Rupen Kachal, the young man stabbed early in the hijacking, became a symbol of the tragedy. His death reminded everyone, this wasn't just a negotiation story.
It was murder. Cold-blooded murder. His name would be remembered long after the headlines faded. The global fallout. The release of Maulana Masood Azhar later led to the formation of militant networks that would influence future attacks. One of the released men, Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, would later be linked to the kidnapping and murder of Daniel Pearl. These consequences showed the long shadow cast by the decision made during those 7 days. The crisis didn't end in Kandahar. It echoed for years, across countries, across borders, across history. How this hijack changed aviation forever. After the hijacking, major changes were made worldwide. Airport security became stricter. Passenger screening improved dramatically. Cockpit security was strengthened. International counter-terror cooperation increased. Especially India upgraded aviation safety systems after the Indian Airlines Flight 814 hijacking, because the world had learned a brutal lesson. Terrorists only need one opportunity. Authorities must be ready every second. The psychological scars. Many survivors later described lifelong trauma, nightmares, fear of flying, sudden panic attacks. Some refused to board airplanes again, ever. Children who survived the ordeal carried emotional scars into adulthood, because surviving terror doesn't mean escaping it. Sometimes it stays inside your head forever. Final reflection. 7 days that shook the world. From Kathmandu to Amritsar, from Lahore to Dubai, and finally to Kandahar, Flight IC-814 traveled thousands of kilometers. But the real journey wasn't measured in distance. It was measured in fear, in survival, in sacrifice. 7 days, 1 dead passenger, hundreds traumatized, and a nation forced to make an impossible choice. Freedom at a terrible cost. The end.